Welcome to the Toronto-Portland Site-Specific Orientation. In the next slide, I will show you a quick clip of what the project will look like once complete.
Said I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me.
COVID-19 protocols at the PLFPEI project are in line with Ontario guidelines. All persons coming to site must complete the passive COVID-19 health screening that is posted and made available prior to entering the site project work areas. The use of masks both inside and outside is a personal choice. As a reminder, all parties are expected to manage COVID-19 related absences. Please see the passive screening to the right.
Orientation and training. All site personnel must receive the Elliston Site-Specific Safety Orientation before they are permitted to work on this project. Site personnel that have received the orientation will be issued a hard hat sticker that is to be displayed on their hard hat. All site personnel must produce a valid WMIS certificate and MOL worker or supervisor awareness certificate at a minimum. Other proof of training will be required depending on the work activity. For example, fall protection, confined space, lockout, tagout. If you are required to complete any working at height, you must produce a valid working at heights certificate. Duties and responsibilities. All project personnel are required to comply with OSHA, Ontario Construction Regulations, and Elliston Safety Program. Report all incidents, injuries, near misses, and hazards to your supervisor immediately, no matter how minor it may seem. Use the internal responsibility system to make the work safe. Always ask your supervisor to use adequate control measures to manage hazards. If you feel that the hazard has not been made safe, escalate your concern to a higher authority. Regardless of your position or role on site, everyone is responsible for safety. Personal protective equipment, PPE. 4 pieces of mandatory PPE are required on this job site. Number 1 is boots. They need to be green triangle, 6-inch, high-cut, steel-toed, or composite boots. The second item are hard hats. They must be CSA approved. Ensure that nothing is underneath that will alter the fit. There is no use of hoodies on the job site. The third item is high-vis safety vests or upper garments. These must be fluorescent blaze or international orange. The fourth mandatory item are safety glasses. These must be CSA approved and must be worn at all times. Other PPE may be required, for example, hearing protection, face shields, gloves, respirators. Always reference the Safe Work Procedure or SDSG. Fit for duty. The use of non-prescription drugs or alcohol is strictly prohibited on this project. All site personnel are to perform work without any limitations or impairment resulting from, but not limited to, the use or after effects of alcohol, illegal drugs, non-prescription drugs, including recreational cannabis, prescribed medication, or any other substance. Individuals found under the influence or observed consuming will be immediately dismissed from this project, and the proper authorities will be notified. Our Fit for Duty policy is available and posted on our safety notice boards. Site contact information. In case of an emergency, all of the emergency contacts are posted in each of the main Elliston site trailers. The primary point of contacts are always the site supervisors. These trailers are located at 312 Cherry Street and 62 Villers. Route to the nearest hospital. The nearest hospital is the St. Michael's Hospital, located at 30 Bond Street in Toronto. It is one of the 2 trauma centers here in Toronto. All maps and directions to the St. Michael's Hospital are posted on our health and safety boards, located in our main site trailers. Here is a photo of all our designated muster points. The main emergency muster point is Gate 2. Gate 2 is located on 312 Cherry Street, displayed in the orange section. Depending on your work areas, your supervisor may designate other emergency muster points. Check in with your supervisor. Site parking is made available at 312 Cherry Street. All site personnel may park your personal vehicles here for free. PPE is required when not in a PPE-free zone or in the parking lots. Emergency preparedness and evacuation. If there is an emergency on site, you will be notified by 3-short blast of an air horn. In this project, we have many separate work areas spread out throughout the project limits. Therefore, the designated muster point for each work area may be determined daily by the supervisors and also listed on a PSA. All personnel on site must gather at that muster area point. Do not leave the muster area until a head count has been conducted and you have received confirmation from Elliston that it is okay to do so. Always be aware of the nearest hospital locations and who to call in case of an emergency. The emergency response plan can be located on the main safety board. First aid facilities. All employers are required to ensure that there is an adequate number of certified first aiders and first aid supplies available to their workers. Elliston has certified first aiders on site, and a first aid kit and eye wash stations can be found in all Elliston site trailers and first aid recovery room. Elliston first aiders can be identified by a hard hat sticker, and their names can be posted on the health and safety notice board. Unsafe work, workers' rights. In Ontario, we have 3 basic rights when we come to work. The right to know. The right to know what are hazards associated in the work that you are required to carry out. Right to participate. You have the right to participate in your health and safety through your workplace inspections, joint health and safety committee meetings, and training. Right to refuse. You have the right to refuse unsafe work that you feel puts you or others in danger. Always report unsafe conditions to your supervisor and have them make the work safer. Use the IRS system. Internal responsibility system. Go to a supervisor first to make work safe. If it is still not safe, escalate it to a higher authority. Site access and parking. Site is accessible only using the designated entrances and exits. Each subcontractor must sign in and out using the online subcontractor site sign-in and out form. This link is available through the orientation email. Do not open fence panels or hoarding without authorization from Elliston. This includes any water edge delineation barriers that have been installed. Site hours are from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Work outside of these hours may be requested in writing and approved by the discretion of an Elliston superintendent. Construction parking. Parking is only permitted in designated spots identified by Elliston. Back into work spots where possible. Visitors. All visitors must report to ELISDON and must be escorted while on the project as per the visitor policy. Visitors must sign in using the online site visitor policy link. Check in with ELISDON prior to bringing any visitors on site. Disciplinary policy. ELISDON will not tolerate contraventions of the OHSA regulations, ELISDON safety program, environmental policy, or any unsafe acts or conditions. This policy typically involves a verbal warning, written warning, and a final warning, which may result into your removal of the project. ELISDON does reserve the right to immediately remove anyone that violates the project site rules. Subcontractors are required to monitor and issue their own actions. However, ELISDON will issue further discipline if it is determined that the discipline was not adequate. Pre-job safety assessments, PSAs. Pre-safety assessments, also known as PSAs, FLHAs, tailboards, daily start cards, must be completed and reviewed with you by your supervisor daily, or more often if the tasks or conditions change. The PSA is to identify hazards and control measures that are associated with your work for that day. PSAs will be reviewed by ELISDON field staff on a normal basis to ensure accuracy. PSAs must be submitted to ELISDON Safety at a minimum of once per week. All workers are required to sign in and out on the PSA at the start and at the end of their work shift. By completing a PSA, you are ensuring that you have properly planned the work and that the workers can do it safely. As a written document, it can serve as evidence of due diligence. Incident reporting. All incidents, no matter how minor they must seem, must always be reported to your supervisor and to ELISDON field supervision. Any incident that have caused an injury, property damage, and near miss, which could have resulted into an injury or property damage, must be reported to ELISDON and investigated promptly. Incident reports must be submitted to ELISDON within 24 hours of an incident. All subtrades of ELISDON must have a return to work program in the event that a worker is made ill or injured at work. The life-saving rules. There are 7 life-saving rules on ELISDON job sites. The life-saving rules will be strictly followed to ensure the safety of our employees, subcontractors, and stakeholders. Life-saving rules are not negotiable. Adherence to the life-saving rules and all safety policies, processes, and procedures is an obligation for our personnel, including ELISDON employees, subcontractors, and visitors to our sites and offices. When a possible life-saving rule infraction occurs, the employee will be asked to stop work and will continue their duties until an investigation is conducted and concluded. After an investigation, anyone found knowingly violating a rule will be subject to actions up to and including termination and/or removal from the ELISDON site. Working at heights, fall protection. Never be at or above 2.4 meters in height near any openings or leading edges without a proper fall protection system in place. Always utilize measures to prevent tools, equipment, and material from falling. If you are expected to complete any working from height, you must have a valid working at heights training. All fall protection equipment must be inspected daily and recorded on an inspection form. Approved fall protection and rescue plans must be in place prior to working at height. Guarding. Never disable, bypass, modify, or remove any required equipment guarding, or render a safety device ineffective. Never enter an area cordoned off by red danger tape unless authorized. Lockout, tagout, zero state energy isolation. Never work on any energized system or equipment or machinery without authorized lockout, tagout in place. Always verify zero energy state before work begins. Confined space and restricted work areas. Never enter confined, restricted space unless trained, authorized, and with an approved entry, permit, and rescue plan. Excavations and trenching. Never access an excavation deeper than 1.2 meters that has not been adequately sloped, benched, or shored. Ensure all your underground facilities, utilities are located and marked prior to starting an excavation. Elliston's pre-dig hazard assessment must be completed prior to starting any disturbance of earth. Excavation by mechanical means will not commence within 1 meter of a utility. Hand digging or hydrovac must be used to expose utilities. Valid locate sheets for public and private buried utilities must be reviewed and in the possession of the operator at all times. Hoisting and crane operations. Always follow proper safe lifting guidelines. Do not walk under suspended loads, elevated excavator buckets, or other similar equipment. Safe lifting plans must be submitted to Elliston prior to any lifting work being conducted. Mobile equipment. While operating mobile equipment, always wear a seatbelt. Always obey speed limits. Always use a spotter when your view is obstructed. Do not use your mobile device. All equipment operators must complete and record a pre-use inspection. Do not enter the swing radius or travel path of the equipment unless you have received permission from the operator. Equipment operators and other workers in the vicinity must all be aware of blind spots around machinery and must communicate either verbally or through eye contact. Fall awareness. Falls are the leading cause of critical injuries and deaths in the construction sector. We are all responsible for identifying and controlling potential fall hazards. The following exposure areas must be identified and controlled. If you're falling more than 2.4 meters, falling more than 1.2 meters if the work area is used as a path for a wheelbarrow or similar equipment, falling into operating machinery, falling into water or another liquid, falling into or onto a hazardous substance or object, falling through an opening on a work surface. If any of the above hazards are observed on site, they must be reported to Elliston immediately. Do not approach an area where any of the above hazards are present unless a guardrail system has been installed to eliminate the hazard, protective covers have been installed to completely cover the opening, you are trained in working at heights, provided proof of training to Elliston, have the necessary fall protection equipment, and have a written and approved fall protection plan and rescue plan in place. Safety talks, inspections, and summaries. Each subcontractor must conduct at minimum a weekly safety talk on a topic of their choosing. A roster sheet with workers' signatures must be submitted to Elliston Safety a minimum of once per week. Elliston may occasionally assign a mandatory safety topic. Each subcontractor is required to complete and submit a subcontractor weekly safety inspection and a subcontractor weekly safety summary, also known as a Form E and Form F. Violence and harassment. Violence and/or harassment will not be tolerated and are grounds for permanent dismissal. Violence in the workplace and harassment in the workplace. Both policies are made available within the Health and Safety Plan. Elliston is committed to providing a violence and harassment-free workplace whereby mutual respect is of paramount of importance. You are required to report any acts of violence and harassment that you are a victim of or have witnessed. On this job site, there is seen to have a higher level of crime than other areas. Nightclub activity and homeless presence in the area specifically. Take the following precautions. Be vigilant at all times, especially when working at night. Never work alone. Ensure work areas are adequately lit. Stay within the construction area, and ensure you're reporting any threats or suspicious acts or people. Bars and restaurants in the vicinity of the job site have generated some violent criminal activity. We have no issues within project personnel or on the site specifically. Even so, please take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and report any incidents of violence or harassment to your supervisor. Washroom facilities. Employers must make washroom facilities available to their workers throughout the job site. All washrooms will be maintained as required. Workers are expected to treat all washrooms respectfully and to use the designated facilities. Fire safety. Fire extinguishers must be readily accessible around all fuel storage areas, fuel power generators, and must be fixed to all mobile fuel-powered equipment. Fire extinguishers must be at minimum 4A 40 BC in size. They must be inspected at a minimum of once per month, and the inspection tag must be kept current. Employers are required to provide fire extinguisher training to their employees. Smoking is not allowed within 9 meters of flammables or inside any site trailers. All fuel and flammable material must be stored as SDS instructions. Traffic management. Traffic protection plans, also known as a TPP, must be developed whenever a worker is exposed to traffic. The TPP must identify how workers will be adequately protected from traffic hazards. Only trained and a competent worker are permitted to direct traffic, must have their traffic control person training as per OTM Book 7. Regulation stop and slow paddles must always be used when conducting traffic control duties. Only designated areas are to be used for entering and exiting traffic closures. Pedestrians always have the right of way. Extreme caution is to be used when merging from the roadway into the work zone, as well as from the work zone to the roadway. Flashing or rotating beacons or hazard lights must be engaged on all construction vehicles and construction equipment while in the work zone. Slow-moving vehicle decals, also known as the orange yield triangle traffic sign, must be fixed on all construction equipment, especially when traveling outside of the work zone. Housekeeping. Clean up your work area as you work, or at least once per day. Do not allow material or debris to create hazards to workers or pedestrians. Always ensure there are clear access paths. Stop work orders may be issued if your work area reaches an unacceptable point. A clean work zone is a safe work zone. All food and personal items must be discarded into a trash bin. Do not litter and always clean up after yourselves. WHMIS. All workers must have a valid WHMIS training. SDS must be used on site for all controlled products, hazardous materials, including fuels. SDS located in our red binders on our site trailers. Workers must use PPE as per SDS sheets. Controlled products must be handled and stored as accordance to the SDS. Public protection. All reasonable precautions must be taken for the protection of the public. Do not discuss the project with members of the public. Always refer them to the Elliston superintendent. Ensure that all hoarding, materials, signs, and equipment are secured and report any defects to your supervisor or to Elliston immediately. Always ensure to keep gates closed to prevent unauthorized access. Ensure signs are in good repair so that the hazards and requirements are properly identified and communicated. Also, please be aware of the Martin Goodwin Trail when accessing or egressing off-site. Contaminated soils. The due diligence report contains a summary of the discovered contaminants on site. Environmental and geotechnical testing reports are available upon request. Exposure may occur during excavations, ground disturbance, or handling contaminants. Hazard levels depending on the specific contaminant, concentration, and duration of exposure. Exposure would occur through dermal contact, ingestion, or inhalation of dust and vapors. Continuous monitoring is being conducted on site. In the event of a monitoring exceedance, all personnel at risk will be notified. If peat is discovered during excavation, continuous monitoring, including methane, combustible vapors, and organic vapors, and ventilation controls must be in place prior to any person entering the excavation. NAPL, also known as non-aqueous phase liquids, can be found above and below the groundwater table, depending on the density and contaminant of concern. Knowing the risk of other contaminants, such as metals, hydrocarbons, and VOCs including benzene, can be found in various concentrations throughout the site. Pre-dig hazard assessment checklists identifies the exposure of known and newly identified contaminants. This must be completed prior to any ground disturbance work. Dust masks and air purifying respirators must be made available to all workers involved in ground disturbance activities through your employer. Keep all contaminants within the job site by storing workwear on site or designated storage work areas. This prevents your vehicle, home, and other areas outside of the job site from contamination. The PLFPEI air quality and dust monitoring plan must be followed when working at various as needed. This plan includes identification and control measures for odor-causing contaminants. The plan is available upon request. Poisonous plants. Be aware that these plants contain oils which can cause allergic contact dermatitis, such as swelling and itching of the skin, red rashes, and/or blisters or bumps. Protect yourself by wearing the appropriate PPE, such as protective clothing and/or respirators. If you are in contact with a poisonous plant, report it to your supervisor. Use soap and water and perform first aid if needed. Do not burn any of the poisonous plants, as the smoke may cause respiratory issues. Some plants found on the job site are poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, and giant hogweed. Working around water. All personnel working above or around water exposed to a risk of drowning must wear a personal flotation device, also known as a PFD, and review and adhere to the safe work practice of working above and around water. If you will be working within 10 meters of the water's edge, you must install an approved water's edge delineation barrier at 2 meters or more. All personnel must stay 2 meters away from the edge at all times. Working within 2 meters of the water's edge requires either eliminating the fall hazard or having the necessary procedures to protect the safety of the worker. Site-specific emergency rescue plans must be in place, submitted to LSDON, and reviewed with all personnel involved. Rescue personnel and equipment must be readily available for immediate response. Equipment must be inspected and maintained. It is strongly recommended to either use a guardrail system or a travel restraint system. Other rules and requirements. Obey all signs and tape. No radios, MP3 players, or earbuds allowed. Cell phones are allowed in hazard-free areas only. No unauthorized photography is permitted on this job site. Get consent from LSDON prior to any photos or videos being shared externally. No work is permitted from ladders. Ladders can only be used for access and egress purposes only. Ensure access and egress ladders are inspected and are in good working condition. They must extend 3 feet past the landing, must be secured at the top and bottom, and you must always use 3-point contact.
Thank you for taking the time to complete the Portland Flood Protection and Enabling Infrastructures Site-Specific Orientation video. If you have any questions or comments, please contact the HEC team, Paul Amaral, Sham Kumar Vasan, Krishna Patel, or Tyler Gamble. Contact details are located on the Health and Safety Bulletin boards at 312 Cherry Street and 62 Villiers Street. Thank you.